Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Korean Atlanta Mentorship here with another Velocity Banking review. And today's Saturday. And you know what that means? It's literally the best day to pay off debt. Why? Because every day we do these Velocity Banking reviews is literally the best day to pay off debt, right? So if you put your thinking cap on and use some of that SAT college entrance exam logic, then you can come to the conclusion that today is literally the best day to pay off debt, right? And once we make a video tomorrow, that'll be true too. So, velocity banking, debt payoff strategy. What is it? It's dumping all of your money into debt using something called a line of credit. Okay. And so this is what we're going to do. All right. What we're going to do is first step is create a budget because the budget is a debt attack plan. So in this scenario, we're going to use numbers that we don't usually use. $58,000 of income, right? So $4,000 a month after tax. Expenses $3,000, $800 of savings, and then we have to create an expense breakdown which lists every single debt that you have. Now I'm going to make a comment here. Um, I am so out of touch. So when I see $58,000 of income, I was like, that's not realistic, right? Well, realistic for me. And here's the thing, realistic for the average person versus realistic for me are going to be two different things, right? Because if you don't know who I am, and wait for it, I'm going to do a financial flex. Um, I paid off a mortgage in 2 years and 9 months, right? So if you don't believe me, this is my mortgage statement where I paid off a mortgage in 2 years and 9 months, and oh, do you see that? I'm actually flexing right now. Yeah, financial flexing. Yes, 2 years and 9 months, and so, if I ever hear that someone paid off a mortgage in, like, 10 years, 7 to 10 years, I'm like, "Man, something's wrong." That's a little bit way too slow. That's literally what I'm thinking. Um, when it comes to debt payoff, right? And so, but that's what we're gonna do. And also, I kind of think nowadays this is how screwed up my brain is. $58,000 of income is not realistic, right? Even though that probably is like the average income. In fact, I used to make $20,000 a year. You know what I used to do making $20,000 a year? Work part time inside retail stores, asking people, "Hey, do you want your water checked?" I swear it's not a pickup line, or maybe it is. That could be a good pickup line. Do you want your water checked? But it's actually the line I use to market water filtration services for inside retail stores, like, right? And I just walk up to people and get paid like 12, 13 an hour, and I'm like, wow, I got paid very little. And what's crazy is I paid off a mortgage in 2 years and 9 months, so none of it, a lot of times people are ashamed about their situation, but you'll realize that the only people who will shame you are usually the people who you think would help you the most, right? Which is kind of a shame, right? I'm using the word shame a lot, but it's true. It's true, right? They actually, I think, have studies on like who's the most likely people to steal your identity. It's your family. That's what they said, right? ID theft. It's like, well, hackers from the dark web are gonna get your identity. It's probably mom or dad or junior, right? They're probably the most likely to steal your identity. I know. We don't expect it. All right, so we have to do an expense breakdown, list every single debt that we have because this is a debt payoff strategy. And then here we have our general expenses that we're paying for every single month. So this is a little bit lower than usual. And if we just kind of do some math, right? Multiply this by 12. This is pretty much how much I used to make in a year, 18,000. So I think we can make these numbers work, right? And then our housing is $843. So we somehow got a cheap mortgage, what would consider to be a cheap mortgage these days, and we have an auto loan, and we're able to do it on a salary of 58,000, right? And so, normally I kind of always like to do salaries of 100,000 or more because if you don't know who the bank's favorite customer is, it's people who don't need money, right? So, there's a reason why there's two things the bank checks that are kind of independent of each other. Your credit, which is basically kind of like your history of how do you pay things on time? That's what credit is. And then your income, which is how much money do you make, right? So the banks want both. They want good credit and good income. And so a lot of people have this myth inside their head, like you can get lots of credit without a lot of income, and that's actually not true. Now, obviously, there's stepping stones to this, right? You gotta, start somewhere, but you need both, right? And banks don't lend money to people who need it. Okay. Now, let me go back to what I was doing with the velocity banking thing. So same income, same expenses, but here's where we put our big boy or girl pants on is we don't save money. So if you take a look here and you ask the average person, "Hey, what's better? Saving $800 or saving 0?" A lot of people will freak out and say, "You got to save that 800. What if you need it in case of emergencies, right?" And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of operate how our mind works when it comes to checking and savings, right? Like you have to understand the bank's business model is they take your money, right? And then they give you like a 0.1 to 4% interest rate and then lend it out at a much higher interest rate, right? So this is why like back in the 80s you kind of heard of like, oh, the savings accounts were like I think 12% interest rates like in the 80s, right? But that's because they lent the money at much higher interest rates, whereas nowadays, they might lend it at 6 and 7, but then only give you like 1 to 4, right? So there's that arbitrage or spread that the bank has theoretically when it comes to making their money, right? So they want you to save money because saving money is good for them. It may not necessarily be good for you. So first step is we're not going to necessarily save money, right? Saving money is a no-no. And if you want to see how this looks like in real life, um, money comes in and then money goes out. And you treat your money in the checking or savings like a hot potato, right? So the fundamental question about what is velocity banking? How do you know you're doing it? Is does the money stay in your checking account after you spent your or paid off your bills, or does it just kind of go into the line of credit, right? Like where is the checking account in your entire what you call, I guess, your banking workflow? Is it at the middle or at the end? If it's in the middle, that's velocity banking, meaning that money comes in and it just goes right out, right? And then the end point of where you want to kind of put your money is in the line of credit, whereas average American banking is the checking account is like the final destination, right? Like you want to put the money in the checking account. And so what we're going to do is not save money and dump all of my money into something called a line of credit. So if you've never heard of a line of credit, basically it's just a financial tool where you could borrow money, pay it back, and use it over and over again. So if you have a credit card, that's a line of credit, swipe, pay it back, use it over and over again. But there's also personal and home equity lines of credit. So if you take a look here, right? So this is a home equity line of credit of $373,500, right? $373,500 home equity line of credit. $373,500 home. So what does that mean? Basically, I click a button on the bank's website. All that money could potentially get dumped up to $373,500, and then they'll charge me an 8.5% interest rate annually, right? And so, yeah, and so this is what am I even talking about? All right, so if I take a look here, I actually have a lot more lines of credit. In fact, I have over $739,000 in lines of credit. $739,000. Okay, 739,000. And I'll tell you how I get these lines of credit. Right? I just know the secret of the banks is that they don't lend money to people who need it. And when I got these lines of credit, I just went to a bank when I didn't need money. That's literally the truth. I'm not like hiding anything from you. And so if you understand this, then you'll understand velocity banking. You'll understand how to not, get into a ton of debt, and you'll know how to expand your credit because, when a bank sees you and they're willing to give you credit, it means you have good financials. That's what it literally means, right? So banks don't lend money to people who need it. And so if you're in a position where you need money, like, you know, maybe $800, like you might be like, oh, things are kind of tight here. They're not going to lend you money. And if you especially make like more than 10 grand a month and you have $800 left over, they're definitely not going to lend you money, right? And all right, so we're going to assume we have access to, I don't know, maybe like a $70,000 line of credit. Would we get a free and clear line of credit at this point? Probably not, because banks don't lend money to people who need it. But think of this as, what if you did? This would be like you're a lifesaver, right? And the reason I talk about this is because if you know how to do it right, you'll never get to a point. Um, Almost 99% will never get to a point where you're struggling with money if you have debt. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and go here. So we use something called the cash flow index to determine what the debt payoff order is. Really easy. So it's basic balance divided by the payment. And then what you do, okay, is you move some of that balance into the line of credit, right? Or whatever, not some of it, all of it if you can, with the low ranking numbers. So the high ranking number is saying, hey, if you pay this off, you get such little cash flow. I mean, think about this. You pay 23 grand to get $400 of cash flow, but you have to pay 200 grand to get $800 of cash flow. That's why you pay this off last, right? High ranking ones you pay off last. So let's go ahead and do this. In fact, I don't even need 60 grand. I only need like 25 or 20, whatever. But the more the merrier, right? I have over $739,000 in lines of credit because I did not need money. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and put 13 grand of the credit card debt here. Guess what happens? Bam, bam. So we literally went from $800 to $1,200 of cash flow, and let's go ahead and pay it off. And then the final step is we put the 4,000 into the line of credit, and then we take our expenses out, and then after every single month, we'll pay off the debt. So let's go ahead and do that, right? So I'm going to do this, and then what we're going to do is 1238.38. So to get the next month's balance is based on the previous month's balance plus the previous month's interest minus our cash flow. And then what we're going to do is take the average daily balance, multiply it by the interest rate, 0.075, divide by 12, and that'll give you the interest for the month. Look at that. Only $77 for interest, right? And look how quickly the debt is paying off. Oh my goodness, less than a year. Okay. So usually we do scenarios where it's like $167,000 of credit card debt, but obviously we have the income to support that. And the bank would never give you $167,000 of credit card limits unless you had the income to support it, right? So this is what we're going to do, which is 5, 8. So how much should we pay off in how many amount of months? 11 months, and then 13K. And we're going to do this. And then now this is going to be simple. Like the lower the income, the simpler it is, right? Because you have less debt and 2 credit cards, which is 13,000. I mean, once upon a time, I'd be like, whoa, $13,000 of credit card debt. Now, if I get a new credit card, I'm not going to lie. If I get a new credit card and it's less than 10,000, I'll be like a little bit insulted. Yeah, a little bit insulted. It's skewed perspectives, friends. Skewed perspectives. That's literally what happens to me. This is why I can't even relate to the average person anymore. Yeah. Yeah, it's really screws you up being financially free. Okay. A lot of people don't understand, quote, the dark side to it. Dark side is you won't be able to relate to most people anymore. That's literally what's going to happen. This is why, like, someone actually said, these days in your videos, you kind of sound like Peter Pan. Well, yeah, because I paid off a mortgage in 2 years and 9 months. So what do I care? It's like I don't have the same worries as the average person will say. Although I do miss having making 20,000. My only worries was paying the rent sometimes. Now, as you kind of get bigger and bigger, you kind of feel like it's almost like when like you're gambling, and I'm not a gambler, but I know this is true with gamblers, and you win a good amount, you can't just leave the table and be happy. Like it's like you have to play bigger and bigger. That's what happens when you make more money. It's like that kind of psychology that you experience where you kind of if you make like $1 million, you feel like, why am I not making like 10 million or a billion, right? It's weird how that works, but I'm gonna tell you that I'm just warning you. If you're thinking like financial freedom is going to solve your problems, you kind of have to be prepared, because now you kind of go into a new set of problems, which is rich people problems, right? All right, enough babbling. So let's go to the loan calculator. So what we do is, with the loan calculator, we just put in the current month that we're at, and then you can kind of see here that we have 19 grand of car payment. Now, normally, if the cash flow index is like 20 or 30, I'm comfortable putting the whole loan into the line of credit. This 40, 50, I'm like, but then it's still a good candidate for moving into line of credit. But let's just do it now because I'm lazy. So we're going to move this entire loan into the line of credit. So this is going to be plus 19078.55. And then this is going to get an extra $400 back in our cash flow. And then what we're going to do is that we now have our new cash flow here, right? And let's go ahead and copy and paste the formulas. And so now our cash flow is 1656.79. And let's see what happens here. And then we see that in about 11 months, the car note is paid. And take a look at the interest. I mean, it's starts off at $100 initially, and then it's like 74, 64. So this is really good. I think a lot, if you look at TikTok videos these days with people in their cars, man, they end up paying so much interest, especially if you're like have subprime credit and you really wanted that Mercedes to impress people. I heard a joke, something about like the desire to show off to other people has made like Mercedes or BMW really rich or something like that. I got to find the actual quote, but I thought that was pretty funny. Anyways, so this is now where are we? 23 months. 23 months. The debt is paid off, and so now this is going to be 13 plus 23, so that's $36,000 of debt paid off. And then now we have the 30-year mortgage, which is pretty good. All right, so where are we in 23 months? So what we're going to do is put this in the loan calculator, 23. That's the current balance, and then 191,000. Now, again, we're in a position where it's pretty good, but I feel like you have two options, right? You could either invest or pay off the mortgage, but I feel like with this level of income, investing might be a little bit tricky, right? Because if your mortgage payment, like the way that I always like to think about like rental housing and all that is that if the tenant doesn't pay you, are you screwed? And if the answer is yes, then don't take it. You know what I mean? Like, don't take the deal. This is why, like, when people talk about real estate investing, they always say like do fix and flip first or wholesaling because you'll have actual income, massive income coming in, and then the passive income is more for like you equity growth, some cash flow, some tax benefits, which is a lot um I guess easier to deal with when you make more money, right? But I think when people talk about rental property cash flow, it's that gets a little bit tricky, right? It gets a little bit tricky. All right, so let me go here. So $843, and so I'd say the safest bet is just pay off your mortgage, right? Pay off your mortgage, or if you're working a W-2 job, you know what the easiest way to make more money with W-2 job? Just job hop every 2 to 3 years, right? Because a lot of people don't understand this concept because they're kind of like, I don't want to say brainwashed, but like we think that the more loyal we are and the more hardworking we are, we get more money, and that's not true, right? Like I kind of, I had this analogy where it's like, why do you get more money when you job hop? Well, that's because you get paid the market rate, right? It's the same thing with a house. Like if you bought a house like 10 years ago, the house price was magically cheaper because that was the market rate of the house, right? You could buy that same house today, 10 years later, it's going to be probably $100,000 more expensive because you're buying at the market rate. Same house, just like if you job hop, same kind of work, but you'll just magically get paid more because the market, right? The market rate in order for you to accept that new job, you're going to get paid the market rate. What are people paying for a new worker? This is why it doesn't really pay to be loyal for the most part. I'm not saying that that's 100% true. I'm saying in most cases it doesn't, right? So, all right. So now let's go ahead and do this and pay off this mortgage here. And we have this velocity banking calculator. So what we're going to do is something called chunking. So what does that mean? It's just you just kind of take off a piece of the loan into the line of credit, and I'm going to show you why chunking is superior to moving the entire loan into a line of credit. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to put our current balance, which is 191,885.29. So 191,885.29. And what's the payment amount? It is, where'd it go? 843.21. 843.21. And then what's our income? It's about 4,000, and our expenses is 1,500. So the expenses is everything except for the loan you're trying to pay off, right? And so let's say that we move this entire loan into a line of credit, okay? You'll notice that this loan gets paid off in 8.8 years and 72 grand of interest, right? So it says interest saved 20 grand. Okay. Now let's do this where we do it in small chunks. Look at that. 20, it's like inverse, right? So you literally pay 22 grand of interest and save 70 grand. In fact, let's do a 30% credit card. And you'll see that even with the 30% credit card, that's better than a 7.5% mortgage replacement. Isn't that crazy? Okay, isn't that really? This is why I say, like, one of the worst things you could probably do with velocity banking is replace your mortgage with a higher interest rate line of credit, especially if your mortgage just was into 2 and 3s. You just swipe a credit card, and that'll probably be more beneficial to both your credit and the amount of interest that you pay. Because, if you're like me, where you're swiping big amounts on the credit card, take a look at this. I logged into the bank's website, and this used to be a $10,000 business credit card, right? $10,000. But because I'd swiped so much with large amounts, and the bank saw that, they're saying, okay, we'll just give you 17,500. So if you're making $4,000 chunks or swipes on your credit card, even at a 30% interest rate, probably one of the biggest benefits that you'll get is that the bank will see that you'll get you more credit. So if it's like, you're worried about, you're not going to get enough credit, bank loves you when you pay off your debt, right? Quickly, so that, and I'm talking about revolving lines of credit, not loans, probably not, but revolving lines of credit, because what they want to do is that when they give you more credit, they're hoping you're eventually going to drown, right? Like, I'm going to be blunt, is when the bank sees that, that when all the banks see that I have over $739,000 in lines of credit and they're willing to extend me credit, it's kind of like, we know you're not going to drown with this, but eventually we want to get you to a point where you kind of feel like you're drowning, but at least you're still alive, and at least you can make the payments on time, right? That's the bank's agenda. But if like, a little bit conscious, you won't fall for it. But most people are not conscious, which is why they have the tallest buildings in the world. All right, so we see right here 7.4 years, pay off a mortgage in 7 years, so this will be 0. And then so now 23 divided by 12 plus 7.4. Okay, and so 9.3 years, we're debt-free. Debt-free, right? So, yeah, so much simpler debt payoff today, because when you work with lower income, and I hate to say $58,000 is lower income because that sounds very, I guess, elitist, It's kind of like, whenever you see, like, people from, like, Beverly Hills on TV, it's like, is that for poor people? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not making fun of people. I'm just telling you that's what happens to your brain literally when you pay off a mortgage in 2 years and 9 months, right? Like, when you get up there, you just kind of like your mind gets skewed. I'm not kidding. I'm not making fun of anybody though. All right. So, but yes, 9.3 years debt free. And you know what's screwed up, when you see like a mortgage paid off in 7.4 years, you're like, something's wrong, even though nothing's wrong. Like, that's what happens to your brain. Okay. Or 7.2 years. All right. Well, it doesn't matter. It's all the same. All right. Well, that's it for today, folks. It's Crane Atlanta Mentorship. So if you watch to the end of the video, just type in the comment box below, today's the best day to pay off debt, right? That will let me know you watched the end of the video, and I'll put a little heart in the comment if you write, today is the best day to pay off debt. And I know what some of you like to write, like, some of you like to write comments like, what do I do in my situation? And then you write me your life story. Folks, if you want to talk to me about your situation, I don't give actual advice, right? But I kind of open the door, we'll say. Click the Google form link below. Educational packages from 2 grand to 20 something grand. No guarantees, right? Because this is we don't do that here, because I'm not you, right? Like, I can't guarantee that you'll do what I'm thinking, okay? But educational packages, I sell them. So it's kind of an easy way for me to kind of make some money, and also kind of give you the tools you need to to help yourself if you're going to take it, right? And all right, so that's it for today, folks. Have a great day, and I'll see you on the next video.